Hey everyone, quick look at this. See that? Almost 98% of you watching aren't subscribed yet. Subscribing is the best way to not miss any new infidelity stories and support what we do here. It's free and it makes a huge difference. Hit that subscribe button below. Okay, now to today's story.
7 years. 7 long years since Leonard left. Said he needed space. Funny, ain't it? You get married, you share a life, a home, a bed, and then one day they need space. What they really mean is they found someone younger. Someone with less mileage. Anyway, after that, it was just me and the dust bunnies. The house felt too big, too quiet. So, naturally, like a lot of folks these days, I drifted online. It's a whole world in there, you know? You can find groups for anything. Knitting, old movies, even folks who still remember when TV came in black and white. That was my comfort zone, my little corner of the internet, where nobody knew my real name or how many wrinkles I was hiding. It wasn't like I was looking for love or anything. Lord knows I'd had my fill of that roller coaster. But the chats, the forums, the silly little online games, they filled the empty spaces, made the days go by a little faster. I could be someone else online, someone wittier, maybe even a little mysterious. In real life? Well, in real life, I was just Amelia, the divorced lady who spent most evenings in her pajamas, reheating leftovers. My connection to the outside world, literally, was the internet. Funny how things work out, right? The very thing that kept me. Company was also the thing that decided to go on strike one Tuesday morning. The little light on the modem was blinking red, like a frantic SOS signal. No emails, no news, no connection to my online buddies. It felt like someone had pulled the plug on my whole life support system. I tried all the usual tricks. Unplugged it, waited 10 seconds. Sometimes I even counted to 20 just to be sure. Plugged it back in. Nothing. Still that angry red blink. I even called the internet company, bracing myself for the usual runaround. You know how it is. Automated menus, hold music that sounds like a dying cat, and finally, someone who sounds like they're reading from a script and couldn't care less about your problems. But to my surprise, this time was different. The fella on the other end, his name was Kevin, sounded, well, almost human. He walked me through some basic troubleshooting, but no luck. He said they'd have to send a technician out. Sometime, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. tomorrow, he droned. Tomorrow? That felt like a lifetime in internet years. I grumbled and hung up. What was I supposed to do all day? Actually talk to my neighbors? Read a book? I hadn't done either of those things in a long time. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual. It was the kind of silence that makes you start thinking about things you'd rather not think about, like Leonard's laughter, the way he used to hum off-key while he made breakfast, the feel of his hand in mine. See? That's what happens when the internet goes down. Your brain starts wandering down memory lane, and it's not always a pleasant trip. Then, around 3 in the afternoon, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maybe it was the mailman with a package. I peered through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a young man in a uniform, holding a toolbox. It had to be the internet guy. Already? That was a surprise. Usually, sometime between 8 and 5 meant closer to 4:59 p.m. I opened the door, a little surprised. "You must be the internet technician," I said, stating the obvious. He smiled, a genuine friendly smile that reached his eyes. "That's me. Name's Mike. You must be Amelia?" I nodded. And that's how it all started. A simple knock on the door. All because my internet decided to take a day off. Little did I know that Mike showing up was about to shake up my quiet little world in ways I never saw coming. Mike was younger than I expected. Maybe late 20s, early 30s at most. He had this easygoing way about him, like he wasn't in a rush to get to the next job. He asked if he could come in, and I stepped aside, feeling a little flustered. I hadn't really made an effort with my appearance that day. It was just another day at home, after all. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, comfy old sweater and jeans. The kind of outfit that screams, I've given up on life. Or at least, that's what it felt like to me sometimes. He got straight to work, though. Didn't make any awkward small talk, which I appreciated. He checked the modem, the cables, fiddled with his little gadget. I watched him, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. It had been so long since I had a man in my house, other than the occasional delivery guy. Leonard had been gone for what felt like forever, and I'd gotten used to my solitude. It was comfortable, in a way. Safe. But sometimes, like when the internet went out, it felt suffocating. After a few minutes of tinkering, Mike looked up, a little frown on his face. Looks like the problem is outside, ma'am. I'll have to go check the box down the street. Ma'am. That made me feel ancient. I told him my name was Amelia, and he smiled again. That nice smile. Okay, Amelia. I'll be right back. While he was gone, I found myself looking around the living room, seeing it through his eyes. The faded floral wallpaper I'd never gotten around to replacing, the stacks of books gathering dust on the shelves, the framed photos of Leonard and me from years ago, when we were happy. Or at least, when I thought we were happy. It's funny how your memory can play tricks on you. You remember the good times, the laughter, but you tend to forget the little cracks that were always there, the things you ignored because it was easier than facing them. Mike came back in, shaking his head. It's a bit of a mess out there. Looks like some critter chewed through one of the main lines. I've got a replacement, but it'll take me a little while to get it all sorted. He said it in a way that wasn't complaining, just stating a fact. I offered him a cup of coffee, and he readily accepted. We sat in the kitchen while he waited for something to download on his laptop. He told me a little about his job, about the funny things that happen when people rely so much on the internet. He had a good sense of humor, a dry wit that made me chuckle a few times. It was easy talking to him, natural, something I hadn't felt in a long time. With Leonard, towards the end, every conversation felt like walking on eggshells. We'd argue about the smallest things, and the silence between us was thick with unspoken resentments. Mike asked me what I did, and I told him I was retired, used to work as a librarian. He seemed genuinely interested, asked me about my favorite books, the authors I admired. It was refreshing. He wasn't just making polite conversation. He actually seemed to care about what I had to say. As he was getting ready to go back outside, he paused at the door. You know, he said, for someone who's been without internet all day, you seem pretty calm. I laughed. What's the point of getting worked up about it? It's not like yelling at the modem is going to fix it any faster. He grinned. True, most people would be tearing their hair out by now. He went back outside, and I watched him through the kitchen window, working diligently in the afternoon sun. There was something appealing about his focus, his competence. It wasn't just that he was fixing my internet connection. It was the way he went about it, with a quiet confidence. It reminded me of a time, long ago, when I felt that same sense of capability, before life and disappointment had chipped away at my self-assurance. When he finally came back in, he was wiping his hands on a cloth. All right, Amelia, he said, that smile back on his face. We should be back in business. He checked the modem, and this time, the little light was a steady green. Hallelujah. He packed up his tools, and I thanked him profusely. He was about to leave when he turned back. You know, he said, a little hesitantly, I'm going to grab a late lunch. There's a decent little diner down the street. Would you maybe want to join me? I was surprised, flustered again. It had been years since a man had asked me out, and this was the internet guy, who was probably half my age. Societal norms, the little voice in my head whispered. What would people think? But then I looked at Mike, at his kind eyes and his genuine smile, and another voice, a much quieter one, whispered, "Why not?" I'd like that very much, Mike," I said, surprising myself with my own boldness. The diner was nothing fancy, just a small local place with red vinyl booths and the smell of frying onions hanging in the air. It was exactly the kind of place I hadn't been to in years. Leonard had always preferred fancier restaurants, places with white tablecloths and snooty waiters. This felt real. We sat across from each other in a booth by the window. Mike ordered a burger and fries, and I opted for a tuna melt. We kept talking, the conversation flowing easily, picking up right where we left off in my kitchen. He told me more about his life, about how he'd moved to town a couple of years ago for the job, about his dreams of maybe one day opening his own little tech repair shop. He was ambitious, but not in a pushy way, just quietly determined. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone in years. About my life before Leonard, about my love for old movies, about the little garden I used to keep in the backyard before I let it all go. It felt good to talk, to have someone listen without judgment. He even laughed at some of my corny jokes, which was a bonus. Leonard had always said my sense of humor was an acquired taste. We talked for so long that the waitress had to come over and ask if we wanted anything else. Mike looked at me, a mischievous glint in his eye. "How about a slice of that apple pie?" he asked. I smiled and nodded. Why not? I was already throwing caution to the wind. Over the pie, the conversation shifted a little. He asked me about my divorce, and I hesitated for a moment. It was still a raw subject, even after all this time. But something about Mike's genuine interest made me feel like I could open up. I told him about the years of growing apart, the feeling of being invisible in my own marriage, the quiet relief I felt when Leonard finally left. Even though it was followed by a crushing loneliness, he listened intently, nodding occasionally, offering words of understanding and support. He didn't try to offer any easy answers or platitudes. He just listened. And in that moment, I felt seen. Really seen. For the first time in a long time. As the afternoon wore on, I started to notice little things about Mike. The way his brow furrowed when he was thinking, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the way he chewed his lip when he was concentrating on something. These small details, these little glimpses into who he was, made him feel real. Not just some figment of my lonely imagination. When we finally left the diner, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the street. He walked me back to my house, and we stood on the porch for a moment, an awkward silence hanging in the air. I didn't know what to expect. Was this just a friendly lunch? Or was there something more? He broke the silence. "I had a really nice time today, Amelia," he said, his voice a little softer than before. I'd really like to see you again." My heart fluttered a little. That quiet voice in my head was getting louder now, urging me to say yes. But the other voice, the one that was cautious and afraid of getting hurt again, was still there, whispering warnings. I took a deep breath. "I had a lovely time too, Mike," I said, trying to sound casual but feeling anything but. Maybe we could do this again sometime." He smiled. That wonderful, genuine smile. "I'd like that very much." He hesitated for a moment longer, then leaned in and gently kissed me on the cheek. It was a light, innocent kiss, but it sent a little shiver down my spine. It had been so long since I'd felt that kind of touch, that kind of connection. As I watched him walk away, I touched my cheek where his lips had been. A wave of emotions washed over me. Surprise, excitement, a little bit of disbelief, and a whole lot of something I couldn't quite name. It felt like something had shifted in my quiet little world. Something unexpected. Something good, and for the first time in a long time, I went inside my house with a smile on my face and a feeling of hope in my heart. The internet was back on, but for the first time in 7 years, I didn't immediately reach for my laptop. Instead, I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. And then, without even thinking about it, I reached for my makeup bag. It was time to embrace the real world again. Even if it was a little scary, waking up the next morning felt different. There was a lightness to the air, a sense of anticipation. It was silly, really. One little kiss on the cheek, and suddenly the world seemed a little brighter. I made myself a proper breakfast, not just a reheated muffin, and even put on a decent outfit. It felt like I was getting ready for something, even though I didn't have any plans. Mike had said he'd call, and I found myself checking my phone every few minutes, like a teenager, waiting for a text from their crush. It was ridiculous. I was a grown woman, for goodness sake. But that little spark of hope that had been ignited the day before was still flickering, and I didn't want it to go out. The phone finally rang around lunchtime. It was Mike. His voice sounded a little hesitant, almost shy. He asked if I was free that evening, and I said yes without even thinking about it. He suggested we go see a movie, and I readily agreed. It didn't even matter what the movie was about. I just wanted to spend more time with him. That evening, as I was getting ready, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different, putting on makeup again, choosing an outfit that wasn't just comfortable, but also made me feel good. It was like I was rediscovering a part of myself that I had forgotten existed. The woman who cared about her appearance, who wanted to feel attractive. That woman had been buried under years of solitude, and the assumption that those days were over. But maybe they weren't. Going out with Mike felt a little surreal. It was like stepping back into a life I thought I'd left behind. Holding his hand in the movie theater, the way he laughed at the silly parts, the comfortable silence between us. It all felt so natural, so easy. It was nothing like the strained dinners and forced conversations I'd had with Leonard in the years leading up to our divorce. After the movie, we went for a walk in the park. The air was cool and crisp, and the stars were starting to come out. We sat on a bench by the lake, just talking. He told me more about his family, about his dreams for the future. I told him about my children, who were grown and had lives of their own, about my regrets and my hopes for this new chapter in my life. The age difference was still there, a little elephant in the room that neither of us had directly addressed. I knew what people would think. An older woman with a much younger man. It wasn't exactly the norm, but when I looked at Mike, at his kind eyes and his genuine affection, the judgment of others didn't seem to matter as much. What mattered was how I felt when I was with him, and I felt happy. Happier than I had been in a long, long time. As the evening drew to a close, he walked me back to my house again. This time, when we stood on the porch, the silence wasn't awkward. It was filled with a different kind of tension, a sense of anticipation. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and then he leaned in and kissed me. This kiss was different from the one on the cheek. It was longer, deeper, filled with a tenderness and a passion that surprised me. It had been so long since I had felt that kind of intimacy, that kind of connection. It was like a dam had broken inside me, releasing years of pent-up emotions and desires. We stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, lost in the moment. It felt both new and familiar, exciting and comforting. It was a reminder that even after years of solitude, even at my age, I was still capable of feeling desire, of experiencing joy, of finding connection. That night, Mike stayed, and for the first time in 7 years, my bed didn't feel so empty. The morning after was a mix of exhilaration and a healthy dose of, what have I done? We made coffee together, a comfortable silence settling between us as we moved around the kitchen. It felt normal, in a wonderfully unexpected way. We talked about the night before, a little nervously at first, but then with more openness and honesty. We acknowledged the age difference, the potential challenges, the societal expectations, but we also talked about how we felt, the genuine connection we had found, the unexpected joy we had brought into each other's lives. Mike was incredibly respectful and understanding. He didn't try to dismiss my concerns, but he also made it clear that his feelings for me were real. He wasn't just some young kid looking for a fling. There was a maturity about him that belied his age. We decided to take things slowly, to see where this unexpected connection might lead. We knew there would be questions, maybe even judgment from others. But we also knew that what we had found was special, something worth exploring. Over the next few weeks, we spent a lot of time together. We went on dates, just like any other couple. We laughed, we talked, we shared stories. I met some of his friends, and he met my children, who, surprisingly, were very supportive. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of insecurity, moments when I wondered if I was just fooling myself, if this was all just a temporary escape from my loneliness. But then Mike would look at me with those kind eyes, or he'd hold my hand across the table, or he'd tell me something that showed he truly understood me, and those doubts would fade away. The internet, which had initially brought us together in a roundabout way, faded into the background. Our connection wasn't based on online personas or fleeting digital interactions. It was real, tangible, face-to-face. Looking back, it all seems a little surreal. A broken internet connection leading to a chance encounter, which blossomed into something more. It makes you wonder about all the missed opportunities, all the connections that might have been if we just looked up from our screens more often. My life is different now. It's fuller, richer, more vibrant than it has been in years. Mike has brought a spark back into my life that I thought was gone forever. He's shown me that love and connection can be found in the most unexpected places, at any age. It's not a fairy tale. There are still challenges, and we're still figuring things out. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. And it all started with a broken internet connection and a young technician named Mike, who had a really nice smile. Life has a funny way of surprising you, just when you think you've seen it all. And sometimes, the best connections are the ones you never saw coming, the ones that happen offline, in the real world, with all its messy imperfections and unexpected joys. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for all the high-speed internet in the world. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any cheating wife stories.